So another expression of this intense sociality is the whale stranding. So whales, everyone's heard of whale stranding. There's a picture of it here. Okay, this was, I think, a group of pilot whales somewhere in Florida. Basically, these are a huge, I don't know, this is in Tasmania. Strandings are a huge mystery. It's known without question that certain things complicate it, like noise pollution and currents, different kinds of currents can confuse the whales. And when they strand, they all end up getting beached, and a lot of them all die together. But there's more than this going on. And the apocryphal story here is a group of, I think it was false killer whales who stranded in Florida. And there was a whole group of them all lined up on the beach. And then you had these well-meaning humans that came down to try to help them out, understandably. And what they would do is they had some contraptions, and they would kind of begin to push the whales off the beach. But every time they pushed one off, it would wiggle back onto the beach. So they couldn't figure out what was going on. And then they realized one of the whales was sick. One of the whales was bleeding, a female, out of her ear. And eventually that whale died. And as soon as that whale died, all the whales wiggled off the beach and left en masse. So what it suggests, I mean, we know what loyalty feels like. It suggests an incredibly intense kind of loyalty, so deeply bonded or connected or interwoven they are within each other. So that's one example I like. The other one is, if you look at whales going down, they all go down together. There's a synchronicity. If you look at dolphins, of course, famously, and it's just like literally their movements are calibrated within like just a millimeter of each other. There's this incredible synchrony. What I'm saying is this incredible powerful loyalty, this incredible intense sociality. And now there's a ton of research coming out about how intelligence and this social instinct are linked. So whether it comes to problem solving, this is all cetacean whale stuff. Problem solving, flexibility, innovation, self-awareness. They passed the mirror test, dolphins. So they have this incredible high level of cognitive ability too, which I won't get into because anytime I hear the word cognition, I think that's so boring and I fall asleep. But I will talk about brains because brains are incredibly interesting. That's a big bucket of brains. And this was a minke, so this is actually a lot smaller than a sperm whale brain, about twice as big as a human brain. Minke whale, maybe 3 times bigger. So I've gotten to be good friends with this comparative neurobiologist named Lori Whitehead, and Lori is kind of the master of comparing animal brains, and so we just like Skype together, just totally nerd out on comparative brain talk. And what she was saying, what she says about the whale brain is that, I mean, first of all, it's incredibly elaborated. And back in the day, people were like, oh yeah, they're just big balls of thermoregulating fat. That you got this sperm whale with this giant brain. People said, oh no, it can't really be doing anything because we're the smartest, and this brain's just, they're stupid, these animals, so there's nothing going on there. But then they started looking at the brain and realized that it's actually incredibly active and elaborated, and there's tons of stuff going on. Our auditory brain is here. Their auditory brain is totally merged with their, sorry, our visual brain is here, and then we have an auditory brain here. Theirs is merged into one crazy, intermeshed, messed up, weird kind of audio-visual thing, which probably has to do with echolocation. So that's really interesting. But even cooler, they have this whole other lobe that we don't even have. It's called the paralimbic lobe. And basically, out of their emotional limbic system, which is the seat of emotionality, which we share with them, there's this whole outgrowth of extra emotionality. So what's going on there? Lori says, she's like, yeah, look, basically when it comes to their emotional brain, there's more hardware supporting more of that function. So what does incredible emotional sophistication look like? We don't even know how to begin to ask this question. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I think to kind of make a little detour about it, let's think about the human mind. What's the human mind like? Manipulation mind is the human mind. So basically, here's my high-speed story about this. Human hands allowed us to kind of manipulate the environment. It started with tools, with technology, but pretty soon we make the jump to written language, and all of a sudden we're manipulating ideas. We're kind of in internal manipulation. The manipulation goes internal. So that's right here. And this drawing of abstract boundaries around ideas, I think it could even be linked to our territoriality. It's possible. So you begin to realize how, wow, these fundamental aspects of our embodiment, growing up in a land with gravity and being territorial, that might create kind of preconditions around which thoughts can come up, which is really interesting. And this is an area called embodied cognition, which almost nobody is thinking about in terms of animals, but it's out there. So there you got the humans. So there we are. We're off like in kind of dissociated in symbol space, you know, blah, 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 blah. We're not even in the physical world anymore. We're actually on our cell phones in symbol space. So the question is, what happened to the world? We were in our bodies, and now we're off in idea world. We're still in our bodies a little bit, but we're very much out here as well. And I think this is one of the reasons why, and there's been a lot written about this, especially by David Abram, but why we're in the current environmental crisis that we're in. That, in a sense, we're dissociated. We sort of lost this intimate body-to-body connection with the real world, and we're off kind of hatching plans in abstract space, and the whole fucking planet's going down the toilet. I mean, if we were more awake, we would notice these feedback loops, or more sensitive to it, what's happening. So now we can go to the cetaceans. Cetaceans, famously, don't have hands. This is a New Yorker cartoon. I love this one. It's like the slowest book ever written. So if they do have technology, it's not material. It's relational. It's expressive. It's emotional. It's social. So to compare the two, on the human side, this is sort of ideas about complexity. On the human side, you have this sort of great analytic complexity that we like to pat ourselves on the back about, and it is pretty impressive. But on the cetacean side, you're talking about a social, emotional complexity. So I think of this as like, imagine living in a society as rich and as layered in feelings as the human world is in ideas and cultural tropes. You can imagine huge subtleties of intention and intuition and sensitivity and mood, where the whales are just really tuned into each other and communicating in this more kind of liquidy, mood-like layers of kind of just yumminess, whatever that is. So how might whales sense these subtleties? Sound is a big part, and I'll get to that in a second, but I'm also curious about what might happen when this kind of sophisticated emotional capacity is not even directed to each other, because we know intuition comes out of emotions in an interesting way. There's a relationship between intuition and emotions. So what happens when you direct that onto the larger world? So it's not even that you're directing your emotional knowing into each other. What does the emotional mind, the mind that's sort of in the embodied mind, know about the world at large? So Einstein, there's a great quote from Einstein. He said his best theories began in his bones and in his body. So we don't even know what source of information intuition draws on. We're talking about a kind of knowledge about the world that doesn't depend on abstract reasoning, that is intuited and expressed by totally different means. And this seems to me my one huge reason why this stuff matters. These are probably fundamentally different takes on reality. Every animal, through the prisms of its unique nervous system, its sensory organization, the sort of matrix of sensibilities, they embody a completely different way of knowing about the world. So you can think of it as the universe is evolving out of and expanding, and then it's kind of like, it's like a hand. Each of these tendrils is a different animal, and then it's kind of looking back on itself or looking out at the world through all these different lenses, all these manys kind of coming out of the one. And so you can think of it as a kind of biodiversity of perspective. We are only ever locked in our human perspective, but if you can move your way out, if you want to really understand a larger world, then it seems to me, don't you want to do the rounds of the community? Doesn't it behoove you to try to see how those other organisms experience the world themselves? And because they know things about it that as part of a community you can have access to. But if you're locked in your own solipsistic little straitjacket, you're just going to be in this house of mirrors. So I think that's kind of what happened to humans in a way. Everyone talks about what's unique and what's so awesome about humans, and humans are awesome and unique. But the thing that's unique about them is we just basically turned our internal world, and we turned the external world into our internal world. We basically were like, okay, we're going to pave the world and make all these buildings and control it all, and we just created all our own human structures. And it's almost like we just kind of made this really awesome treehouse, and we climbed up inside the treehouse, and then we sat in the treehouse, and we forgot there was a forest outside, and we just sort of stared at the mirrors in the treehouse. And that's what we're doing. So you end up in this sort of or you can think of it as like in a nautilus shell. It's like we kind of tie ourselves in a nautilus shell, all our technologies and our ideas, and looking back on ourselves, we get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter into the little shell, and so we're like, I'm totally happy. I love Facebook. It's like, it's the best. Social technology is so liberating. Meanwhile, there's oceans and mountains and animals floating around doing awesome stuff. And anyway, what the fuck is all I can say. Wake up, man. So, okay, back to the ocean. Now we're going to go a little bit more psychedelic. What kind of place is the ocean? The original question we asked. Well, it's an audio world in a big way. Sight is important in the ocean, but if you want to see at depth, if you want to see in the dark, then sound is obviously critical. So water is the perfect medium for transmitting sound. It moves 5 times faster in water. So like bats, whales all use, toothed whales all use echolocation, so sperm whales, killer whales, and dolphins. So this is sound that sees. From seamounts to reefs to individual fish and passing boats, whales use sound to navigate and identify objects and surfaces. Everyone can understand that. It's like sonar. But we don't know what it's like in terms of, it could be that, you know, everything that they're hitting, like a, you know, over here, another whale or a boat or a seamount, is a kind of audio hieroglyph, like this sort of pattern of clicks. If you want to, here's a pattern of clicks. This is a sperm whale. So that every so this is bouncing back, but other whales can share it, and they can begin to hear, okay, a single pattern might represent, you know, they can begin to probably associate patterns with things that are out there in the world. Of course they don't. They're these gigantic brains for 35 million years. If we can figure it out as like sonar operators on submarines with like 30 years experience, and they got 30 million years experience. So this is one piece. And now what's coming out that's really interesting is that this capacity may not be limited just to the toothed whales. There are a few scientists who are starting to think that actually the great whales, their songs are they're echolocating. It's almost like they send these songs out in this really low frequency. It rolls, and the big whale, a blue whale song can roll out across the entire expanse of an ocean basin, like 2,000 miles. And that the song itself is ricocheting off seamounts and continents, and then coming back to the whale. And so it would be like kind of, you're in a huge cathedral, and you have this giant strobe light, and kind of moving this strobe light around the cathedral. You can think of that as the ocean basin. And that, so the whale is sort of floating through this huge map of space.